nobody knows what a song is supposed to be lyrically. It's a well-narrated hallucination. Just make sure that it comes from something that feels like it has the essence of truth, something that feels like it needs to exist. We as creatives are ferrying ideas from one realm to this one.
You're listening to the Inside the Mix podcast with your host, Marc Matthews.
Hey folks, welcome to Inside the Mix. Today, I am thrilled. I always say this, and I always back it up by saying I mean it, and I really do mean it, to be joined by one half of the hit synthwave duo, The Midnights, the talented singer-songwriter, Tyler Lyle. Tyler, thank you for joining me today. It's been a long time coming. How are you, my friend?
Doing very well. Just got back from Guitar Center. I bought so many cables and missed one very important one, so I have to drive back to Guitar Center.
Oh, no way. No way. I thought you were going to say there you bought a load of cables and then a guitar as well. So it was one of those runs where it's just cables.
No, I find the more time I spend in pro audio world, the less sexy pieces of gear you buy and the more cables you buy.
100%. My last trip to the to our local guitar shop was just to buy XLRs, and I picked up a load that was second hand for about £2. So that was the exciting trip for me. So I totally get it, man. Great. I really do.
I'm good otherwise.
Fantastic. So in this episode, we're diving deep into Tyler's songwriting process, how he crafts the Midnight's nostalgic and cinematic lyrics, and also collaborating remotely with Tim. Instantly delivers heartfelt synthwave anthems. Here we go, I got all this. Yeah, this is great stuff. So if you're a producer or songwriter looking to elevate your lyric writing and maximize collaboration, you don't want to miss this one. If you're not familiar with Tyler, I've just got a little bit of background here. If you're not familiar with Tyler and the Midnight, so as I mentioned then, a gifted storyteller, songwriting roots are in folk and Americana, shaping your sort of signature poetic lyricism. In 2012, you partnered with Danish producer Tim McEwan to create The Midnight using retro synthwave with deeply emotional storytelling. And then you've got your solo career and other ventures as well. So as I mentioned, in this episode, we're going to be focusing on lyrics in particular. And this I'm really excited about because it's probably the part of songwriting and producing that I struggle with myself the most as well. From a metal background, if it's metal, I can write metal lyrics quite well. But when it comes to the more sort of heartfelt synth element of it, I fall short. And so I'm excited about this one. So, from concept to song is the start here. So, on your wiki, you mentioned that the Midnight songs often begin with a cool musical skeleton from Tim and a lyrical skeleton from yourself. Can you walk us through how a typical song comes together? Maybe, for example, your recent release or latest release, Love is an Ocean.
Sure. Yeah, I feel so grateful to have Tim as a creative partner because I don't natively have that producer gene. And I think that there's a reason why it's difficult for people who have gotten good at production, who have been in it for a decade and have really figured out what they're doing, to then try and switch gears and write lyrics. It's hard because the production element is a system. You know, it's an engine that you can learn, and you learn your engine, you learn your way of doing things. But it's a lot of gain staging and equalization and compression, and those are things that exist already. You know, your plugins exist, your presets exist. You're going on a good day from a 1 to a 2 or a 1 to a 3. You're dealing with things that already exist. Mm-hmm. In lyric world, you're starting at 0. And there's no system, there is no start, there is no prompt that allows you to easily begin a song. And I think that is kind of the I was once given a songwriting award from the Songwriter Hall of Fame and went to their induction ceremony in New York. And Stephen Still was on the podium talking about writing songs. And he said, writing a good song is sort of like trying to start a truck that's sitting on a block of ice. It's a miracle if it happens. There's nothing in the machine that you can tweak. There's no amount of craftsmanship or whatever to give you that live ember. It's always kind of a gift when it happens. So my process with it is rather different than Tim's. Tim is a producer. He has spent 20 plus years getting good at production. My way of dealing with the sort of inherent weirdness, the high failure rate of lyric writing is to do a lot of it. I'm in my studio from, call it 10 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. most days, and I subscribe wholeheartedly to something called the ass in chair method of songwriting. And you put yourself in at your desk and have your instruments around you, and you work. And if something clicks, if something connects, if there's something there, then you can follow it. And if nothing arrives, or if nothing good arrives, then that is the default. And all that you can really count at the end of the day is whether you were in the environment that you're supposed to be in, and kind of ready. And ready for me means that I've done my daily pages, that I've done some kind of meditative practice, and that I've exercised. And usually, if those things are done, then I'm in the right spot. And if the gods of song deem me worthy that day, then they'll arrive. And if not, then I've done everything in my power to be ready. So it means that I have tons and tons of ideas to Tim's relatively small amount of crafted work, but his crafted work is less process oriented and more project oriented. So he has one song to finish and he goes all in, and it can take him 3 months to really dial in a song, because he's incredibly meticulous. I don't have that attention to detail on my side of the workbench.
Interesting. I what you said right at the beginning there about having the gene of like the producer element of it, because everything is sort of pre-crafted in a way of putting it. But then you say with the songwriting, you sort of like you're starting from nothing. And the truck on the block of ice, I totally get that, and I get that with when it comes to just producing in general. To be honest, really, really interesting stuff. So you mentioned there that you're spending a lot of time during the day. Or of a given day, just songwriting, and you've got that routine before you go into songwriting as well. You mentioned meditation, for example. Do you find that you have to be in your studio, or do you get inspiration outside of it as well? Are you one of the songwriters that you'll be walking? I don't know if you have a dog or not, but if you were to walk a proverbial dog, would you like have your phone out, have an idea, and just sing it into your phone? Are you one of those songwriters as well, or does it have to be in that moment of you in the studio?
I find that most song starts happen. I got my first smartphone, I think in 2009 or 10, and I downloaded something called Evernote.
Yeah.
And I think I have 4,113 notes. That seems low, actually.
Wow.
But every day usually there's some kind of. I'm filling up the bucket. Let's see what's a non-embarrassing thing. I don't know. What can I share? I play the game by not playing the game. They call me the strategist. That's So if that makes it onto a song, then
there
great.
We go.
Otherwise, it's just a little kernel, and it's much easier to come to the studio and to build something out around something that rhymes, that has kind of an identity already. But those are the things that just fall from the sky, and you just try and do your best to catch them so that you can come back to them later.
You mentioned then that Tim has, so he's working on, let's say, a lot less than yourself. So he's the producer. He's got that, for example, one single song, and he's going to go through from start to finish with that. Is he sending you these songs for you to then write lyrics to, or is it sort of the other way around? You say, I've got this lyrical idea. Have you got anything that matches this, or is it a bit of both?
I would say that, I think Tim is a true artist, and I am I called myself a ditch digger a long time ago. And it's just, you show up for work and you move the dirt, and what you uncover really is none of your business. The labor is the But Tim really gets inspired and sometimes can get demotivated and then gets inspired again and it gets demotivated. When he has something on his plate, he generally does a good job of staying focused. But no, it's pretty easy for me to put a song out into the world, to just throw some things against the wall. How it usually works for a midnight track is that I've written a lot of really, really rough drafts, and Tim will come to the table with one or two kind of song ideas, a loop, an A and a B part maybe, and that's my in. He can't really translate my acoustic guitar songs into synthwave world, so it's my job to kind of go into my large amount of rough drafts and go, okay, what fits here, what wants to exist, and once we get a little bit of traction, then he will add something else, and I will add something else. And usually that is the meat of where the midnight kind of takes on its identity, as a separate creative exercise. And Tim will, to his credit, the next album is written. So my work is done, and Tim will spend the next 3 months up every night, dialing in kick drum sounds and EQing everything. And so to write a song for me is relatively quick. For him to finish a song it takes a long time and a lot of labor and a lot of skill in his domain, which is production.
Yeah. So talking about the production element of it, slight tangent here. So Tim does go forward, and then he sort of takes it and does that production side of things through mixing, and then onwards and wherever it goes. Have you ever been at all sort of interested in, or have you learned or picked up anything along the way? Have you ever dabbled in the production and mixing element of it?
Yeah. Not of the midnight. I know my limits, but yes, I have a full recording studio that I'm in right now. Over lockdown, I've decided it was time to get serious and time to finally learn this craft that I've been dabbling with. I like production a lot. The problem is it's a big system, and to really know it well, you kind of have to just be a producer. And then move on to the next thing. I spent 15 years as just a songwriter. I sold my car when I moved from LA to New York in 2014 for, I think, $1,500, which was enough at the time to buy an Apollo Twin and some plugins and an SM7. And so I tinkered a lot and learned to produce myself when I was living in New York. But during COVID, I really set about going, okay, how do I make my vocal chain sound like I want it to? How do I get my bass playing up to par? And I spent like 3 years producing a record called The Transcendentalists by myself, and it turned out okay. I'm actually not all that pleased with it. I'm going back into the studio with some friends to redo it, but. No, I love production, and I feel like the end that I'm responsible for is mostly vocals. And on the side, I do the acoustic stuff. So if I can record acoustic guitar as well, and I can record vocals well, then the rest of my studio, which I can show you a little bit. It's
let's do it.
It's being taken apart and put back together a little bit, but. I've got my little synth wall over there, my Echo Fix. Nice. Those are my cables from Guitar Center, and then I've got my modular guy over there. So nice. the fun synthesizer toys are for writing and for inspiration, not because I've ever seriously made a track with them.
Yeah. I love the modular synth. It's something I really want to get into. I was in a shop in Bristol over here in the UK. I think you played in Bristol last year, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, we've played a couple times.
Yeah. So next time you're there, if I could remember the name, I would say it. But there is a shop, and it is solely based on modular synths. And I went in there, and I was just like, "This is amazing," but I wouldn't know where to start or to create a song. Just making noise, basically.
It's such a trap.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
For the longest time, I had it outside of my studio because I needed to kind of separate the two worlds. The studio is where productive things happen, and the modular synth is really just where I follow the strange waves of my brain. It's not a productive instrument, but it's a deeply enjoyable one.
Yeah, I kind of liken it to when I'm mixing, and then I'm just going through a bank of snare samples trying to find a perfect snare or a perfect kick, and I'm just wasting time knowing that I've probably already found it. I'm just going through it, and I kind of do the same with synths as well, to be honest. But one question I do have, off the back of your production, you said you sort of upskilled during lockdown, and then you wanted to, or rather you found a vocal chain. Is there anything from that vocal chain or that experience that you then took forward and maybe used in the Midnight's production? Maybe you said to Tim, actually, I found this and it works really well. Could we use this going forward?
Yeah, it's kind of always been that way. My vocal chain is the Midnight's vocal chain, just because we have a lot of distance between us.
Yeah.
So we will get in the same room next month after we've finished our shows in Mexico. I'll fly to LA. My vocal mic is a Soyuz 017 tube. They say it's an kind of a version of a good 67 capsule, but the 67s have always sounded a little different to me. But it's a very warm mic on my voice, and that goes through the Shelford channel by Rupert Neve Designs, and then I've got an LA2A in there just because.
Yeah.
Gosh, a real LA2A with the tubes, it's really nice.
Yeah.
It gives it a warmth, and that attack is so slow and is so buttery. So that's the Midnight chain. Usually we've recorded on a real 67, and we like the Telefunken 251.
Nice.
And every now and then we'll go through a 610 as a pre, and it gives it a kind of warmth that the Shelford channel, it's different. There's there's that harmonic distortion that you can dial in on the Shelford channel.
Very nice.
That I really like. It just gives you kind of that woolly vintage Neve sound that I like. I feel like if Tim was designing the vocal chain from scratch, it would probably be something more like a Manley into an 1176 or something like that. Something with a little faster attack. Make the make the plosives quicker. More of a rock vocal chain than folk or country or classic rock.
Yeah. Two great compressors, though, the 1176 and the LA2A. I love an LA2A. So have you got a hardware version of the LA2A that you're going into?
Yes.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. I'm mildly jealous.
Actually, you could maybe solve this for me. I had an engineer over here yesterday, and I'm coming... So the mic to the Shelford, to the LA2A, then into my Apollo. The question is, if I'm coming into the Apollo with an XLR, is it adding gain? Because I'm not coming in at line level if I'm going in at XLR, because the Apollo wants to automatically add a preamp and a gain boost. So am I... this is my quandary that I asked somebody at Guitar Center earlier. And I don't quite know the answer to.
So you're going into the Apollo. You've gone through the signal chain from the Neve into the LA2A, and then into the Apollo.
Yeah.
And then is the Apollo adding additional gain on top of that as well? Is that the question?
Correct. Because I'm coming in with an XLR and not a line.
I've never routed it that way, to be fair. I'll probably get corrected on the internet. When this goes on YouTube, there'll be loads of people in the comments going, "Oh, it does this, it does this, it does this."
That's all I want. I just want to start a war over a question about gain staging.
I think it will, and then there'll be others saying, "Oh, you should do it this way around, you should do it that way around," and everything else in between. So when this goes live, I'll be intrigued to read the comments. But I'd hazard a guess, if it's going with XLR, the only gain that's going to be applied is the gain that you add with the Apollo. So,
right.
Is it going to... In my head, that's the only gain that's going to be added to. You've got to add some gain to get some signal going in. So you're in control of it there. That's a really weird one. I'm not entirely sure is my direct answer. without having a look at it myself,
Well,
But yeah,
I'm excited to see the comments because
so am
I
I.
bought the cable and I'm on the fence. These are the
Yeah,
big questions, Mark.
yeah. I can see it, man. Yeah, I can't wait to read the comments on this. It's going to be interesting. Saying that, there
So
probably won't be any, but there you go.
oh yeah. Yeah, so your question, do I dabble in production? Yes, I would very much like to up my skills in I would like to be able to put a song from idea to mastered track.
Mm.
But I give myself a C plus after the last 15 years of attempting it.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think this is something I've said on the podcast. Well, this is going to be episode 187 of the podcast, but I think it's one of those ones where I've always said, like, you got to know your strengths, and then when you got to know when to outsource is the key.
that's right.
Know when to outsource, and then think, okay, I haven't quite mastered that yet. I'm going to pass that on to someone else to do, and then maybe learn it in the meantime, or just know your strengths and stick with it. And
There's
yeah,
some
I've
deep
learned
wisdom
that.
there. No, it's
Indeed.
I after trying to make this record in my space for 3 years, I hired out a studio with some friends who are in a band here, not far from here. And instead of me, who is a 5 out of 10 bass player and a 4 out of 10 keys player and a
Yeah,
7 out of 10 guitar player, trying to put a track together to make it excellent, it's so much better to be in a room that I get to be the vocalist and the songwriter, of which I'm a pretty good
yeah.
at both of those things. If I have a hat, that's my hat. And then to be in with a guitarist who's a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10,
Mm.
the same with the drummer, the same with the bassist, just really amazing guys. And it's so fun to make music that way when you don't have to try and fill all of your weakest holes, that somebody else gets to fill them with their strengths. And that is the best feeling. It's so fun to track music that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the stuff I release isn't as well known as the Midnight by any stretch, but I know exactly that myself. I'm a very average guitarist, and I was always, when I was playing in the band I was in this metal band, the other guitarist was leagues better than me. But because I could sort of like hide behind him when I made mistakes, which happened quite a lot. But yeah, I get other bassists in, other guitarists in, because I know my limits when it comes to that. And like you say, it takes that pressure off me having to cobble together and try and upskill and all this sort of stuff. So, and it adds to that creative freedom I find if I can just play to my strengths, like you say there. It makes perfect sense.
I think that's right. And then you in the place of contributing to somebody else's vision as well.
Mm,
You get to fill in somebody else's beautiful table that they've set.
most
Um,
definitely.
but yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, I would like to produce more and better, but we're on a journey.
Yeah, most definitely. Moving on to my next question here. I did say before we started recording this, I very rarely get through all of them, and I think this is the second one I've got written down. And
This is how we do it.
we're over halfway through here. So you mentioned there, this is quite an important one because I've on the podcast before I've mentioned about sort of routines and getting into the habit of whether it's mixing, songwriting, arrangement, whatever it is, and just maintaining consistency. How do you maintain that discipline of, okay, you mentioned meditation and the other bits that are the precursor to your songwriting, but how do you maintain that every day? Because there are days, we all have it, even if you're doing the thing you want to do in the world the most, you have bad days, How do you maintain that consistency every day? What is sort of your top tips for that?
Okay, I'll give you ideal world, and then I'll give you real world. Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, ideal world. I am up at 6:15. I go up before my wife and son are up to a little study up in the top floor of my house, and I write three. They're called morning pages. Julia Cameron wrote a book called The Artist's Way that I read a long time ago, and so I've been writing these 3 pages for the last 11 years, and it helps me just kind of get out of my head and talk about the day ahead and what I need to do and any big thoughts or dreams or plans or anxieties. And then I take my son to school, and after that I go work out for an hour. Either that's treadmill or lifting weights or on the rowing machine. And then what's my last bit? Meditation. Yeah, I go through phases with meditation. Ideally, that's 10 minutes sitting in a chair.
Hmm.
The reality is that I slept in today because daylight savings time is an affliction on parents of young children. And I have about 1 page of my 3 pages done, which I did after my workout today. So usually then I'm in a place to come to the studio around 11 a.m. for a few hours and see what happens. So yes, I wish I didn't have to have that consistency, Mark. It's not something that I feel like you need to meditate to be a good songwriter.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that, like, I used to have it in my 20s just on pure inspiration and Jim Beam and sleepless nights, and I could function well as a creative person in that zone, in that space. And now I have to run 6 miles to be in that mental space, and that's horrible. I used to like look at people running in the morning and think, what jerks, they think they're better than the rest of us. And now that I'm old, I'm like, no, nobody runs a marathon out of choice. There's something that's gone deeply wrong in their lives that they've had to course correct by having to force themselves to run.
Yeah.
So that's roughly how I view the consistency of my creative practices. It's something that keeps me on balance. It keeps me from swinging this way or this way once I arrive at the desk. And hopefully, I'm physically tired enough and emotionally present and mentally able to give at least 4 or 5 good hours to the craft, and then leave it on the table and go on with the rest of my emails.
Yeah. See, I like that. You got the ideal world and the actual reality of it. And what you said about running echoes what I do. Now I've been in my late 30s, and I'm one of those in the morning out running, and I have to do it. I don't do it every day because I think my knees couldn't take it, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I find that I have to do it, and it does help me get in the right mindset. But I have joined that club of running in the morning just to I find I listen to a lot of podcasts that way.
Yeah,
which really helps.
Lilia Broussard, our bassist, talked to me about habit stacking once, and I quite like listening to music. I create like DJ playlists while I'm running or while I'm doing the machines. So that's actually a really healthy part of my brain. I can get my brain on a creative task while I'm working out.
Nice. Lovely stuff. Yeah, I always find it's one of those ones when it comes to routine and habits. It's like I find, and I used to be quite hard on myself when I didn't follow a routine or a habit. But now, as I've got older, I've realised actually it's not the be all and end all. As long as I do something to contribute towards it, I find I feel okay about it. But moving on to the lyrics themselves. So I'm well aware of time here, so I've got a couple more questions I'd like to get through.
Sure.
So on the wiki for the Midnight yourself as well, with regards to the lyrics themselves, I've got a quote here: "The fantasy that I never experienced." So how do you tap into that nostalgia and storytelling to create those sort of that nostalgia and those fantasies that you never experienced in your lyrics?
I had such a good fortune to be an artist in my own right before the Midnight came around. These were, folk Americana, singer-songwriter, confessional songs. I felt like I had these massive, burdens in my soul that I had to work through and give them out as a way to heal or something. And around the time that I met Tim, I luckily had grown tired of myself in that way. And needing to make my therapy other people's, here, listen to my songs. So I was reading a bit of the great 19th, 20th century poets, Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, Walt Whitman. And when I met Tim for the first time in the studio in April 2012, I kind of gave myself the challenge: can I just write the images and withhold the story? Just describe what's happening. Only images, no story. And that kind of became the writing prompt that grew into the Midnight. And somewhere between the first EP, Days of Thunder, and the first LP, Endless Summer, I discovered Carl Jung's concept of the archetypes, and there's always a femme fatale in every mythology throughout history, and there's always, the king or the boss or the the mob boss or the executive. There's always the desperado, the Jason character, the person who's always chasing something. These are all archetypes: the mother, the child, the shadow, the wounded healer. These are all kind of embedded in mythology forever.
Yeah.
And I was listening to bands like the Parliament Funkadelic thing. They do it with aliens. Bruce Springsteen does it with this kind of mid-century American blue-collar work ethic that is fabricated. He's writing his dad's mythology that needed a suffering Christ so that they could, find a hero that suffered, and they needed and then this country band, Alabama, who kind of wrote this mythology of the post-war South. And it's all world building, and it's all using archetypes, and these are completely different kinds of worlds, different genres. They have nothing in common other than the fact that they are using myth to hold their world up, and then they're skinning it in whatever way they want to. And I realized that the midnight can kind of be this receptacle for these unrealized fantasies and myths, reskin the archetypes, right? The lovers upside down, that's monsters. Jason doesn't know what he's chasing. Much like the Jason of the Argonauts or the Jason of Friday the 13th. It's all mythology. The question was, can I play in the sandbox for a little while? And then it became 2 or 3 or 4 records, and this sandbox, started to become real. The Velveteen Rabbit became real as it was loved, and as the Midnight was fortunate enough to find an audience and to start playing live, and to find people who were making videos and montages. It just became real. This archetypal world of cyberpunk or retro futurism or whatever you want to call it. People wanted to live in that world, and so they joined us in making it something three-dimensional, something living and breathing. So it was just a songwriting experiment on my part, but
it's so cool. So cool. The myths and archetypes. As soon as you mentioned myths and how things are built on myths, it reminds me of a book I read called Sapiens by Noam Chomsky. Yeah.
No, you've all Noah Harari.
Oh, was it? Noam Chomsky's
Sapiens.
Another one then. Yeah, but Sapiens, I've got the author on there, slap on the wrist. But yeah, it just reminded me of that. But I love what you mentioned there about Jason and the Argonauts chasing. Was it the Golden Fleece? Was that Jason and the Argonauts? I got that wrong as well. That is right. Yeah, I got something right. And the other one with Jason, Friday the 13th. I love that idea. That's given me inspiration because I'm a big horror fan, right? And I'm thinking, okay, well, how can I create lyrics that aren't explicitly about horror films, but also bring them over into sort of like a synth, a progressive house, a house sort of realm, without making them explicitly about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I'm going to use that idea of myths and archetypes in there. I love that. I think that's great. And images as well. I love it.
Well, make your images symbols so that you can give something to your audience that they will have a direct attachment to. If you give your confessional story, I was at this cross street and talking to this person, and if you're giving your own story, there's less magnetism. There's less for them to reach. You give the image of a child or somebody talking about youth. That was our Saturday morning cartoons. People have a direct connection with these things, and there is kind of a subtle intelligence in backing away as the artist and kind of giving as much to the audience as possible. And you do that via myth, archetype, symbol.
Amazing. Love it. This is great. This is giving me loads of inspiration now to go away and write some lyrics. I say that, tomorrow I'll sit down and be like, right, I'll make a start. And then my mind is just blank. But I love it. This is great. In the interest of time, Tyler, I'm well aware you've got a busy schedule.
No, I've got a call in 20 minutes. If you want to go another extra 10,
yeah,
that's fine. Yeah.
Cool. I think probably this question. No, we'll do this one next because we mentioned about collaboration earlier. So obviously you are collaborating remotely, although you do come together as well with Tim. How do you make the long distance collaboration work? What challenges have you faced, and how have you overcome them?
Gosh, every song is so different. In the same way that every show is so different. There's no in the album process, I'm writing a lot. Hopefully Tim is working on his end. And we usually don't go more than 2 or 3 months without being in the same room together. So
cool.
when we're in the same room, I bring what I have and he brings what he has, and that's really where the marriage creatively happens. Yeah. So really being in the same room is the best. Unless you just are totally inspired by something and you can send that back and forth. It can work, but it's more ideal to be in the physical space together.
Yeah. So in reality, then you mentioned there that you 2 or 3 months is the max that you go without actually being in the same room.
Yeah, that's probably right. This year it's been about once a month.
Wow. And is Tim coming over to the US, or are you going over to Denmark, or is it like a bit of back and forth, like?
Tim is in LA right now, so he's been in the US. So my whole team, the Midnight's team, is in LA. So I'll go there. My wife's family is out there. So I live in Atlanta, so it's easy for me to go there. It's easy for Tim to come here. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think the final question then, and this is because I mentioned this off air, that this podcast started out as a podcast to talk to synth music, synth wave, synth pop, whatever it may be, artists, and it's grown organically, and it's moved into other spheres over the course of 180 odd episodes. But at its core, there is a lot of synth wave producers, artists that listen to this podcast. So yourself here. So for those listeners who want to craft synthwave music with deeply felt lyrics, what's the number one piece of advice you'd give them?
The first piece of advice is sort of be compassionate with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think the synthwave genre, the Midnight was so fortunate to be where we were at that time, because it was around this time that the Apple computer, GarageBand, Logic presets for all these classic synths came installed, and I think that synthwave was this generation's like GarageBand in a way, like not the software, but like people getting in some parents' garage and making music, like in the early 2000s. I think synthwave has become that. And we were just the people that had been in the music business long enough to make it from a professional level. And I think in the last 10 years that we've been doing it, a lot of these bedroom producers have caught up and surpassed us in many ways. Part of the, the secret sauce of the Midnight is that I am a songwriter first, and that Tim is a producer first.
Yeah.
And to have both of those tasks, to wear both of those hats at the same time, is a really hard thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would say in lyric writing, I want synth lyricists to be bolder, to push the limits of good taste, to like really make it challenging. And there are people that push it in the horror thing or make it overly sexual. I mean really just I think Gesaffelstein's new record kind of does it in an interesting way.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows what a song is supposed to be lyrically. It's a well-narrated hallucination. Just make sure that it comes from something that feels like it has the essence of truth, something that feels like it needs to exist. We as creatives are ferrying ideas from one realm to this one, and make sure that it's not just created from a sense of like ego or needing the numbers to be up or somebody to hear, to validate me as an artist. Like, make sure the idea needs to exist first. And I think if you wait until that idea comes and then go all in on that idea, that song, then that's what the world needs more of. So, yeah.
I love it. It needs to exist. What was that soundbite? I say soundbite. I'm going to use it as a soundbite, or at least a quote about the hallucination again. I was trying to remember it. A lyric is a
well-narrated hallucination.
That was it. A well-narrated hallucination. I love that. That's such a good way of describing it. I'm gonna make a mark here on Riverside. Shout out to Riverside for that. A well-narrated hallucination. Love it. Tyler, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so glad we've been able to do this today.
Likewise, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah. It's been a long while since I've interviewed. Just is the wrong word. I interviewed an artist or a producer versus a mix engineer or mastering engineer. So I was really excited, A, to speak to yourself, and B, just to talk to an artist as well, because it's been a long time since I've done it on the podcast. So a really big thank you for this. And I know the audience are going to get loads out of this, as have I already. Lots to take away. Before we wrap things up, is there anything you'd like to share? No worries if there isn't. And where can the audience find you online? Where's the best place to go if they want to know more about you in particular?
Yeah. So my name is Tyler Lyle. I make music as Tyler Lyle. It's a folk, acoustic project, but most of my time is spent with The Midnight. We are a duo that is a 5-piece band live, and we just released a single called Love is an Ocean, and our next record should be coming out this fall, which we're wrapping up right now and we're very excited about.
Exciting times. Fantastic. That should coincide. I think you're over in the UK in October, if I remember rightly.
Yes, we'll be on tour as well in Europe and the Lovely UK stuff. In September, October. Yeah.
Fantastic. Tyler, as I say, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I will let you go now. Thank you so much, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you, Mark.
Cheers, buddy.